Okay, this is gonna be a fun day, man. Oh god, we've got to go in a specific order, dude. This is too intense. It's everything coming all at once. Everything coming all at once. So I'm gonna give like a quick rundown of my first impressions. We're gonna speed run this shit, okay? Summon a random one-cost follower from any faction. So it's like a slow spell that's basically just getting a random one-cost follower. So the only reason you would run this is like spell synergy or something like that. I don't think you would. Oh, it's just a petty captain token. Well, but it says slow. It doesn't say skill. That would be surprising. I think it's different. But yeah, I don't think if this is a card, it's gonna be like particularly playable. I mean, we can start at the top, but this top is all goes skills, right? We have to start like below the skills so we can actually see what does what. So we've seen a lot of this before. Jagged Butcher, Parlay. We haven't seen Powder Monkey. 1/2/1 Ephemeral. Last breath. Deal 1 to the enemy nexus. Deal 1 to the enemy nexus on the last breath. That's kind of cute. I mean, you can definitely do some cute things with like kegs with that. In reality, it's not gonna be great. Like, this is kind of a weak plunder effect because you're not going to be able to get the pre-combat plunder because it's like ephemeral and last breath. And for a 1/2/1, I think there's just got to be better ways to plunder. Okay, Powder Monkey's a token. Look, guys, I'm being very overwhelmed right now. Like, come on, leave me alone. What card did we miss already? Am I stupid? These aren't cards. These are just pictures of the skills. We aren't missing anything, guys. Ye be warned. Give an enemy vulnerable this round. If it dies this round, draw a card. Wow, that's quite interesting. So you have the ability to basically cantrip this. It's like 1 mana to potentially have like a committed removal. This looks like it could be pretty strong, man. This is really good. Is this very counterable? This card looks nuts. It's basically, so in card games, there's this idea of like sort of cantrip, which is a cheap spell that will redraw itself. And that's really, really powerful. The ability to replace a card that you're playing is really good. That's why cards like Avaros and Sentry are very good. And this is great. This is like really great. You can run this in like, yeah, the Bilgewater Ezreal. Bilgewater Ezreal is looking like it has a lot of potential. I think this card is definitely very, very competitive. Hired Gun. When I'm summoned, grant the strongest enemy vulnerable. Wow. Grant. So grant is the keyword that means it's permanent. It's not give. Give would mean it's temporary for that turn. So Hired Gun looks really, really good. A 2/2/3 that basically just for free has that vulnerability. That looks amazing, man. I mean, she just kind of like comes on top with free value as a 2/2/3. She has a solid stat line. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Okay. More Powder. This is a slow spell at 2 mana that just summons 2 powder kegs. That's really cute. It's a large commitment. So over 2 mana, you're playing this over the 2/1 that summons the 1 powder keg. If there's like a big powder keg combo, I think this card could be really good. I actually don't think this is nuts. I think you'd rather play the unit that summons 1 powder keg because powder kegs do offer like diminishing returns. This card's okay. I think it's gonna be running a lot of like combo fun decks. I think it'll probably lose the cut out of competitive decks. Pilfered Goods. Draw a card from the enemy deck. Plunder. Draw 1 more. Holy shit. Oh my god. Oh, that's really fucking good. Jesus Christ. So you can combo that, of course, with Black Market Merchant. If you're plundering, it's a draw 2, and it's going to be discounted by 2. If you have Black Market Merchant, you can use it with Maokai to, like, mill them and just kill them after Maokai sets the deck to 4 cards. This card is pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Double Trouble. Summon 2 random 1-cost followers from any faction. Summon 2 random 1-cost followers from any faction. At 3 mana... God, I can't really see this being like very competitive or reliable. It just kind of seems a bit more fun. You probably wouldn't really want it to be in 3 mana for that. I will say, this is a common good, like if you play a card like this, it's like float on turn 1 and then play this on turn 2. That's how you would play this. That's how you'd play this. I don't think this can choose non-main deckable cards like Yetis, by the way. Golden Narwhal, elusive and vulnerable. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. So it's a 3/2/4 that basically, you know, it has the elusive counter, but they can challenge it with anything, right? I don't think this card is amazing. At a 3/2/4 elusive, I don't think it's really going to be like kind of great, and the vulnerable downside is a little too big. I don't think there's enough of a reason to run this card unless there's specific synergy with something like vulnerable later. Jawl Hunters. Challenger 3/4/1. When I'm summoned, create a random sea monster in hand. We don't know the pool of sea monsters enough to really evaluate this card. A 3/4/1 Challenger that effectively draws a card though is pretty solid. Like that's just a pretty good card. I'm very, very fine with a card like that. Lure of the Depths. Reduce the cost of sea monsters allies anywhere by 1. Draw a sea monster. Okay, so this is pretty huge sea monster synergy. This is basically the card that turns sea monsters into a big build around. This card single-handedly makes sea monsters an entire deck that you're kind of like, it's not a package, you're all in or you're not. It's like a full build around now. Because if you double draw this card pretty early, your game is fucked up. Depending on how many sea monsters are in the pool, we don't know exactly. But if you double draw this in early position, if you're turn 4, turn 5, you've played 2 Lures of the Depths, your game is going to be a little insane. Your game is going to be pretty fucking crazy. It's like a much better Poros next, and Jaw Hunters would always fit a deck like that. So we've already seen Misfortune. Monkey Idol, Immobile, round start, deal 2 to me, and summon a Powder Monkey. So that's the Powder Monkey we saw before off of the Ephemeral token that I thought was a real card. So it's 3/0/4 Immobile, which I guess just means it can't move or attack. That's a keyword. They're going to affix Keg with the same keyword. So every round, it summons a Powder Monkey up to 2 naturally, but if you give it more health, it'll summon more. So every round, you get a Powder Monkey without giving it extra health. What it means is it's a unit that summons 2 different 2/1s that will deal 1 to the enemy Nexus. I think with Powder Kegs, you really want to combine them with things that are doing more than that, I would say. Powder Monkeys are actually, it's almost weird. It says that they're good for kegs. In reality, they're going to be better for cards like Gangplank, cards like Sejuani, cards like Plunder. With kegs, you don't want to be running stuff that's just deal 1 to the enemy Nexus as much. Although, you know, it could help a little bit. To get max value out of this card, you might want to include some way to potentially heal it up a bit. But I think it's going to be a decent card regardless. Yeah, depending on when you play it, it's actually quite interesting because it affects both rounds, and a Powder Monkey is either going to be on offense or defense, depending on like when you play it. So if you have the ability to heal it, and you can double dip on either offense or defense monkey, it's a very weird concept because you will play it on a defensive turn if you want to double down on defense, etc. So, which we haven't really seen that kind of logic in the game before. Pocket Aces. When drawn, costs 1 less this round. Grant an ally +2/+1. So it's basically going to cost 2 for Grant an ally +2/+1. That's a permanent buff, and permanent buffs are pretty rare in this game. They're going to be extremely expensive for being permanent buffs. It's like, you know, standalone is going to be expensive. That being said, two for just like a permanent buff here is going to be, I think, a little limited. You'll see memers run this on Fizz, of course, because it's a permanent buff and Fizz likes permanent buffs. In reality, I don't think you'll probably want this in other things. I don't know if it's great enough overall. Like, you can use this on Twisted Fate. I think Twisted Fate probably wants more health and attack. I mean, he's got quick attack, but still, you want more health and a test. Okay, Sleight of Hand. Plunder. Draw a random non-champion from the enemy hand. A random non-champion from the enemy hand. This is a card that has opponent hand interaction, which is potentially pretty toxic in card games, and that's why they are making sure to limit it. It has to be locked behind the Plunder, and it's 3 mana. But it's a net card advantage swing of 2, which is basically they lose a card and you gain a card. So it's sort of like a 3 mana draw 2. It has synergy with something that the opponents are playing in their hand. Like, for example, you can combine it with Black Market Merchant. Against certain strategies, this will basically just fuck opponents up. This is going to be like a really, really complained about card. This is going to be like, there's going to be clips on Reddit. Like, someone's going to, you know, stick a big value card that's just going to get like stolen. Like, someone's going to top deck a treasure, and then before they can play it, there's going to be some like sleight of hand combo to steal the treasure or something. I don't know if this card is actually going to be super competitive. It's a pretty solid card. It's not terrible, but I expect that complaints of this card will probably go down when people start playing it less. But again, I can't call it a bad card either, right? Karma Sleight of Hand, let's go. Dude, Karma Sleight of Hand, Jesus, that's really toxic. Yeah, we'll have to see exactly how Sleight of Hand works. I do think it's gonna be really, really toxic if it, like, you know, it's gonna be pretty unfun. I'm kind of surprised that Riot printed this card, but that being said, I don't expect it to be like hyper competitive. So I do expect it to probably see some cuts. We'll see on the kind of deck though. Round start. Grant me 0/1 for each card you drew last round, then shuffle my stats. What the hell? Okay, for each card you drew last round, then shuffle my stats. So this card seems weak. In theory, let's say you do a big draw 3, and that means you're gonna have drawn 4 total due to natural, which means you're working with a total of 7 stats. So it could be like a 3-4, it could be a 4-3, it could be a 2-5. In reality, this is almost certainly going to be a very weak card at 3 mana. So again, this card, I don't see, like, people are going to complain about the theory of this card, but the reality of this card is it's probably not going to see play. So I don't think complaints on Slotbot will linger, whereas Sleight of Hand actually might see more play, which means complaints on Sleight of Hand will linger. Island Navigator, 4/2/4. When I'm summoned, create a random 1-cost unit from any faction and grant it Scout. Oh boy. A random 1-cost unit from any hand, any faction, and grant it Scout. It gets permanent Scout. So these, I believe, can't hit champions. As excited as we are for Scout Teemo, this effect should not be able to hit champions. And I should mention faction, they mean region. There's a typo. They mean to say region here. It's supposed to be region. It's not like tribe or anything, it's region. Okay? Like, there's gonna have to be some pretty crazy interactions here. It's like, mostly, you're looking to hit, like, if you hit something like a Precious Pet on the right board, that can be pretty crazy. In a deck that's running Scout, you need something that, like, has a hard time getting blocked. This is really interesting. I don't know exactly how good I feel Island Navigator is, except that it actually does look like it's on this competitive level. It does look like it's not bad. Like, I can't immediately dismiss this card, so it will see a lot of experimentation. Mystifying Magician. Transform an ally into a random 5-cost follower from any faction. And again, that's supposed to be region. So a random 5-cost follower, that's very, very interesting. To evaluate that fully, we'd have to go through the list of 5 costs in the game. Anyone who's played Ethereal Remitter Undying actually already has a pretty good idea of the 5 costs of value. Most 5 costs are actually pretty good, but there's a few big whiffs that you'll find with stuff like, you know, Troop of Elnux is going to be able to go in. There's like 4 or 5 5-cost units that just kind of suck. Overall, the way you were evaluating this is just like, if we transform a dud unit, like transform a 1-mana card, you're basically turning that 1-mana card into a random like 5-cost follower. Overall, I think that it might end up being stronger than Ethereal Remitter, but without the Shade of Naxxramas synergy, it's kind of most of the reason you play Ethereal Remitter. I don't know how much Mystifying Magician will actually be played. It's gonna be like a potential like big curve play. You'll need like good sacrifice targets for this, but I don't expect it to be like super amazing or super reliable. We will have to look through all the 5-mana cards to really get a grasp on it. The Beast Below is a sea monster, okay. Yordle Grifter. When I'm summoned, create a warning shot in hand. Allegiance, draw 1 from the enemy deck. So this is the Allegiance card for Bilgewater. As expected, it's 4 mana like every Allegiance card is. It gets the warning shot no matter what. So basically, you always get a free warning shot that you can use whenever. It's not fleeting. You can use it on any turn. That's already good. And if it hits the Allegiance, you draw 1 from the enemy deck. Holy shit. Oh my god. That's pretty fucking good. This is like a really high power Allegiance card. So the Allegiance Bilgewater deck will be a very real deck. And it seems like the Allegiance archetype being pushed here is the steal from enemy deck archetype. So that's going to be anything that uses enemy cards. Black Market Merchant is going to be the tie together for that archetype. We're going to see Pilfered Goods, and we're going to see, to much people's chagrin, Sleight of Hand. The Reddit posts, they're already being typed up about Sleight of Hand. It's already happening, dude. Zap Sprayfin. When I'm summoned, draw a spell that costs 3 or less from your deck. This is a tune. I don't have great opinions of a tune. I haven't seen a card that has a tune that I feel is great necessarily. But this is a specific tutor. Now, there's one thing about this tutor, and you'll notice it is intentionally designed to not be able to tutor treasures, because all treasures cost 5, right? That's important, because there is a deck where tutors are very, very specific. In card games, the idea of being able to take a specific card and add it to your hand based on sometimes a deck build limitation is huge. I love the existence of this card in this game. I don't know exactly what kind of deck will be able to fit this in. But the idea is you want to be able to build a deck around spells that you want 3 mana or less, and you limit the deck to not running other spells so that your Zap Sprayfin gets that spell every time. The immediate example that comes to my head is in the Sea Monster build round. It will allow you to always get Lure of the Depths, which is really, really, really potentially strong. Sea Monsters did not look like a real build, but with Lure of the Depths, and with the ability to reliably tutor it, that is incredibly valuable. I love the existence of Zap Sprayfin. I love the idea of tutors, and the thing about tutors that I love the most is the idea of a tutor that forces you into a flexible deck build that kind of, you have to do a bit of a puzzle, because to be able to get that tutor, you do have to have the deck building price of not having certain cards in your deck. You're locked out of other 3 or less mana spells, right? And that's a real cost. So you'll have to have a very interesting deck build to be able to play that. There are going to be other ways of being able to use Zap Sprayfin. If you want to do something really weird, like you always want to get, I don't know, fucking Fizz every game, you can use Zap Sprayfin into entry into Fizz. That's a very dumb idea, but you get the point. There's a lot you can do with this card. I love its existence. In terms of competitive viability, yeah, this card is competitive. It's very similar to a Shadow Assassin, if you want to look at it like that. It's a tune will give you the 1 mana back, so it's kind of like a 3 mana 2/2 draw a card. It draws a tailored card, but you can't play it on turn 3. That is a pretty big downside. Overall, this is a good card that will exist on the competitive power level. I love the existence of these kinds of cards in the game. That's my favorite card of this entire set, almost. I like, which might seem crazy to you. Abyssal Eye, Elusive Deep, Nexus Strike, draw a card. Wow, that's kind of toxic. Dude. Elusive Deep, Nexus Strike, draw a card. So it's a sea monster. You'll be able to, get a good discount on this. This is pretty often going to be coming out on turn 4 because of the existence of Lure of the Depths. And you will actually see this card on turn 3 sometimes because of double depth draws. That's a little rarer though. Actually, is that even possible? No, that's not possible. It's turn 4. It'll pretty much be happening on turn 4 in a lot of games. And yeah, it can potentially allow you to draw deeper. In a all-in Sea Monster deck, you will probably value the Sea Monster tag quite a bit. So I do expect that this card will see play in that deck. I think outside of Sea Monsters, there's just no reason to run this card. Hunting Fleet. When I'm summoned, summon a Golden Narwhal for your opponent. Wow. Okay, so Golden Narwhal is the card we saw before. That is, the elusive with vulnerable. So it's a 5/7/7 that basically will give the opponent a 2/4 that you get to kill before they can use it. That is pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful. In something like Hearthstone, we have a lot of cards that will summon cards on your opponent's side of the board. Think back to Hungry Dragon, or there was another example in early Hearthstone that felt a little weak. There's a really big difference between this game and Hearthstone, and that is everything has haste. Okay, so the idea of in Hearthstone summoning something on the opponent's side of the board, Leroy. No, Leroy is the finisher. I'm talking about like a different value card other than Hungry Dragon, the Beast. Maybe the idea of Hearthstone summoning something to the opponent's side of the board is inherently a downside because they get to use their unit before you get to use yours because of summoning sickness, right? Because in Hearthstone, I play Hungry Dragon, your card gets initiative. Your card gets to attack before mine. That is what balances that kind of card. In Runeterra, we have the opposite. That's a big deal. Hunting, like, I will summon a Golden Narwhal for my opponent, and I'll pretty much always do that in a game state where I will immediately kill the Golden Narwhal. So they'll never get to use it. So basically, I always have this 5/7/7 to be able to play that, right? And you can use it post-combat, too, on the opponent's turn post-combat and get the same thing. So basically, you're cheating out a high stat line early at the cost of kind of skipping one attack. I think this card is not bad. It's a value card. I don't know if you can like slot this into competitive decks necessarily. The idea of filling the opponent's board is no longer a thing, and that's the existence of cards like this is almost certainly why they made the Obliterate at 6. It's 5 mana 7/5. Yeah, you can call this card sort of like a 5 mana 7/5 that doesn't get to attack for the first turn, which is not really that good, right? The upside of this card is when you use something weaker to kill the Narwhal. You use something that has 4 attack that you already have on the board. That's what kills the Narwhal. And then this card is actually decent. I don't think I hate this. I would expect this kind of card to not end up in competitive decks, but it's not terrible. It really isn't. Okay, we've seen this treasures already. Razor Scale Hunter. Scout. Play, grants an enemy vulnerable. So this is 5/4/4. You've got the double attacks. We see a lot of Bilgewater things with Scout, and it gets vulnerable right away. So it's like the Moose. Demacia has a Moose Scout that's a 5/4/5, but it has no play effect. So this is like 1 health for that free vulnerability. This is a decent card. It feels like it's definitely playable. Vulnerable actually feels like a fairly powerful keyword. Vulnerable is basically a much better challenger. Vulnerable, right? It's like challenger except much better, because you can grant anything you want challenger, right? basically. And then even if they kill your challenger unit, their threat will still die next turn, right? That's pretty sweet. Now, of course, it does have downsides because it doesn't maintain the challenger. But let's compare this to the most direct comparison is Swiftwing Lancer in Demacia, which is a pretty similar card. 5 mana. It's got that challenger. That one has a powerful Death Wish, and it's got 5 attack. And those matter, but the scout to this will usually hit, and vulnerable is good with challenger, and that bird is a very good card. So I think this card is definitely something that exists on the competitive level, for sure. I think it might be a bit worse than Swiftwing Lancer, but it's pretty comparable, and Lancer's very good. Slippery Wave Rider, 5/4/4 elusive attune. So it's kind of like a 4/4/4 elusive, sort of, quote unquote. I value attune at sort of like 0.6 mana, so I'd call this like 4.6 mana overall. Depends on where you are on the curve. I don't think attune is actually worth very much. If I'm valuing it at like 0.6, even that, or sorry, 0.6 on the cost, which means I'm valuing attune at 0.4 mana. So it's like, I see this as a card that costs 4.6 or something like that. I don't see this card as like super good, reasonably speaking. I think the attune mechanic is going to be very, very limited and seems to be kind of like overcosted in these cards. Obviously it's an elusive. They've shown that Bilgewater has a good amount of elusives. So there could be some kind of like semi-toxic elusive deck in Bilgewater, and you know, and this is a solid stat line. Don't get me wrong. So if you do like a full elusive build around, these cards that are elusives could be good. I don't see this as seeing play outside of an elusives deck. Vicious Plateworm, so this is the token that gets summoned. Such courier or DOP. Devourer of the Depths, Sea Monster, obliterate an enemy with less health than me. And that's the skill we saw before at the very, very top. If you guys want the reminder, that's this Devour skill, almost certainly, that they made for probably this card, but they might add it to other cards. So this is 6/4/4, and it just obliterates something with less health than me. So presumably, what we can assume is that if the deep is triggered, what that's going to mean is that it will obliterate anything with 6 or less health, because deep is +3, and it should resolve in that order. If the deep isn't triggered, then it'll obliterate anything with 3 or less health. And it comes out at potentially 6 mana, although again, with Sea Monsters, you're probably going to see this on turn 5. I expect the all-in Sea Monster deck won't be super good based on these cards. I think it will exist, and it is an actual deck that you can build around. I don't expect it to be super high competitive. This card obviously fits in there. The question is, could you run this outside of Sea Monsters? Like, build around Sea Monsters? Could you run it in just like a deck that plays for deep, like a Maokai Bilgewater deep deck? Cut Nautilus, because Nautilus is just kind of awkward. But Devourer of the Depths, let's put this in there, see how this goes. Like, are you looking at, like, playing this post-deep? Is it good? How good is it when you play it as a 6/4/4? The answer is, I think it's a little awkward. Now, you can do some hand buff things with this, which is sort of funny, right? Like, you can hand buff this with some of Ionia's cards and get a kill there. I think at 6 mana, it's just a little too slow. You need to be hitting big synergies. I would say this is a Sea Monsters card, and it's kind of hard to play it outside of that. 6 mana is really expensive. More expensive than it probably seems. Sheriff Lariat Rose. When I'm summoned, grant all enemies vulnerable. And grant means it's permanent. Ooh. Oh, man. Wow. I don't know. That's pretty crazy. That is a pretty big deal. It is a 6 mana card. I will say, I don't think this card is like Omega busted, but yeah, this is a competitive card. It will be like ran. The thing is, it's very often on these turns that you want to be, depending on the deck you are, it's usually these turns where you want to be closing out the game. Like, the thing is, when you compare this with Citrus Courier, a lot of decks would want to run Courier to close out the game. Sheriff Lariat Rose is a very different kind of deck, right? This is like quintessential, like slow play mid-range. You don't even really want as much of an option to be closing out early. I would say overall, there's like 3 6-drops that we can all see is very competitive. Citrus Courier skews aggro. Cytheria is very balanced and kind of can work in a different style. Whereas Sheriff Lariat Rose is a bit more committal to like a slow play mid-range. Those are kind of 3 power 6-drops that all hit different areas of the spectrum. So Sheriff Lariat Rose is a good card. I will say you won't be able to run it in like all the decks. Like if you are in something like an aggro deck, Citrus Courier is going to be your option, and Lariat Rose is not. And if you're playing a bit slower, I think that Citrus Courier is more of an option in slower decks than Lariat Rose is in faster decks. But yeah, this card is definitely competitive, for sure. Just like, think about it in terms of that speed. Think about it in terms of what your deck is trying to play for, and which of those options you're going to go for. Strong Arm. Plunder. Place a follower in play into your hand. Fucking serious? So you just fucking yoink an enemy card. I mean, it's slow at 6 mana. It doesn't work on champs. So we can compare this sort of to Possession, which is a 5-minute slow card. It doesn't have the Plunder downside, but obviously you're not getting it permanently. I do think that this card is probably not very good, I will say. I think that this is going to be very, very overrated. I think this is an extremely slow card. I think between its slow effect as well as the Plunder downside, as well as the fact that it can't hit champions, I think those 3 things in conjunction will make this card weak. I see the 3 mana one that steals from the hand as something that could be competitive. I do think that this card is going to be too slow. I think that even the deck that would play all of the opponent's cards against them, like the full Allegiance, Black Market Merchant, like you're in all of the Bilgewater cards, you're running like the full I'm going to use my opponent's deck against me card. I think this is the first card from that archetype that I've seen that I probably wouldn't play in that deck. Obviously, it hits some funny spots, right? Like, yeah, you can still Ledros, you guys are saying. It's a hilarious spot. It could be like an interesting kind of tech card. Reasonably speaking, this card is going to be really, really slow and clunky. We can imagine spots where, like, this card will nut out, but it's going to be too clunky overall. Toss 3, deal 7 to a unit. 7 at 7 fast. Holy shit. Yeah, man, that's really not bad. Honestly, this card... so a lot of spells in Runeterra seem bad if you evaluate them as mana cost from Hearthstone or Magic. In reality, the idea of fast speed spells, the idea of spell mana and the idea of open attacks forcing a necessity for spell mana at fast speed in particular, it's not just spell mana. It's also the forcing necessity for outlets for mana at fast speed per the open attack on either side, whether it's your open attack or the opponent's open attack. Usually the opponent's open attack all demands a high necessity for expensive spells. And that's why cards like Vengeance and cards like Grasp that seem super overcosted if you come from other card games actually end up being quite good. Scrapshot is in that vein. Usually you'll see this card at being kind of like a Vengeance. There's going to be some spots where Vengeance will hit when Scrapshot doesn't, and that's going to be against stuff like barriers or stuff that kind of like can't be killed by conventional damage sources in some way, or just stuff that has a fuck ton of health. Overall, this is a worse card than Vengeance. It is a card that hits a region that can probably use it less than Vengeance can. I think this is a decent card. It will see some competitive slot-ins. I don't expect it to be great. I don't expect it to hit toss decks necessarily. It's just going to be like sometimes slotting in. It's a little below like where I would consider the curve to be. But it's all right. Yeah, it's playable. Mind Meld. We're reaching the end here. Slow. This round set all eyes power and health to the number of spells you've played this game. Set all what? Set all allies power and health to the number of spells you've played this game. In Bilgewater. Bilgewater doesn't really have spell synergy, so you play a lot of spells. Does it include itself? Let's say you've played 7 spells. It turns your entire board into 7 7s. It's kind of like a meme card. So I want to point out, this is a really cool card. I don't want to rain on it. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. It's hilarious. It's gonna be a funny card. We're gonna have a lot of funny clips with this card. This is a really non-competitive card. Like, it's really, really, really weak. And there's a few reasons why. Mostly expensive slow speed is why. You don't really want to have big stat sticks in the late game. It has a hard time hitting for value. In reality, this card sees a lot of the problems that cards like Pack Mentality do, which is the idea of a slow speed finisher that needs to be played during the setup turn is kind of inherently not going to fly. This is kind of like a Timmy or Johnny card. Yeah, sort of. Like, it's just like, it's a bit of a meme card, right? Fizz in a spell heavy deck. It's a Fizz card to make him 7/7 at round 5+. Yeah, but you're not going to pay 8 mana to give him like a bit of boost for 1 round, right? It's a for fun card. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you look at Pack Mentality as a card. A lot of people have thought about the idea of running Pack Mentality. In reality, Pack Mentality is like, it sort of almost hits like some competitive tendencies. The idea of a committal, slow card that needs to be used as a finisher pre-attack on the turn you're finishing is almost fundamentally always going to be weak in this game. Almost always. And there's a few reasons for this. Mostly you're pulling into slow speed power options. You might think Rumination. Rumination's a big one. You're usually tapping out for this, which makes you vulnerable even if you have something like Deny in a deck like that. Ruination's a big one, but I mean, there's many others. There's gonna be like stuff like Yone is a big one. That's seeing a lot of play lately, and I don't think it's necessarily gonna be seeing less play in the expansion. I think every deck is gonna have like pretty big ways of punishing like slow ramp up finishers. You really want your finisher to come out at fast speed, right? And it only lasts for this round. Like, you can use it on defense, but if you're doing it then, the opponent can open attack. So, and it's only good for 1 turn. It's a for fun card. It's going to be very fun, but ultimately, there's not really going to be a competitive build around here. Rip Ride Rex. Plunder. Cannon Barrage 7 times on random enemies. Oh, so is this the only thing that calls Cannon Barrage? Or is this one of the Gangplank things too? Deal 2 to a unit. If it's dead or gone, deal 1 to the enemy nexus instead. So the cannon barrage will hit a bunch of things, and if it tries targeting something that's already dead, then it'll go for 1 on nexus. Which means 7 times on random enemies. It's 14 damage. So I want to make it clear, according to this card, it doesn't seem to be able to auto-clear a board. Even after it kills an enemy, it will still try to target that enemy. Which means that, you know, the one damage to Nexus will be happening quite a bit on enemies that are already dead. It's kind of a funny card. It's sort of like an RNG card. I think at 8 mana, it's kind of hard to see a ton of value out of this. It's like a better Ledros. You do have like potential, some real game closer potential for sure. It really comes down to what Bilgewater wants to finish the games with. I will say, yeah, this card could be very powerful. Like, it could be kind of nuts with kegs. I think it will be a powerful optional game ender. Yeah. No, this card is pretty solid. I think that it might look a little bit crazier than it is. It is just one option for you as a game ender. But yeah, this is a good card. This will close out a lot of games. I like the comparison to Ledros. I do think it is kind of, in a way, a better Ledros. It almost fills the spell stack alone. You can deny your opponent out of plays easy. Yeah, the spell stack has a limit of 10, so in theory, if this puts 7 on the stack and you chain 3, then they don't get any response, which is kind of funny. You wouldn't be able to do that unless they responded once, but you'd stop a counter response, which is kind of funny. I think that at 8 mana, this card will actually end up closing a lot of games. I think this is like the keg payoff tool. Straight up. I think that this card single-handedly makes kegs worth getting into. I think this card is kind of nuts with kegs. I mean, because each keg works on all the barrages, right? That should. That should be how it works. So every time it tries, I mean, that would be the way that kegs are consistent. Only 1 barrage. Why would it only work on 1 barrage? Oh, because there are 8 different things. If it casts 1 by 1 on flooding stack, then no. Yeah. If it casts 8 different skills, then yeah, it would only work on the first keg. Yeah. So it doesn't work on kegs. Yeah. So basically, okay. Yeah, that would make more sense. You guys are right. So it doesn't work on kegs. It's an optional finisher. I don't see it as like, it's not super powerful, but it's not super weak either. For an 8 mana card, most of them tend to be pretty weak. This is one that I could consider putting in some decks. Like, it's not super OP, you know, it does hit a few synergy points, but mostly you're just kind of potentially like blowing out a board, finishing, dealing like a good amount of chip damage to the opponent. Funsmith? Yeah, it would work with Funsmith, which, oh Christ, is this card actually good enough to make me think about Funsmith? I think it might be. Funsmith is a card that's just like never hit. This almost makes me think about Funsmith. Dreadway, Fearsome. Draw a Gangplank, double all damage dealt by allies. So while this card is on the board, it doubles all damage dealt by allies. I want to point out, doubling damage dealt by X means abilities. So the way that we have, I believe, how this should work, the way it would be consistent in the game, it doesn't work with skills. So if an ally has a skill that goes to the stack, it shouldn't work. Wait, but then it wouldn't work with like Gangplank or Misfortune, right? But that would be consistent with the other in-game rules. I'm not 100% sure about Dreadaway. Do we know if Dreadaway works on skills or does it not? It seems to work on skills, I guess. That would be a little inconsistent with the rules the game has set up, but it would kind of be the only way this card makes sense. It would be really weird if it didn't work on stuff like Gangplank or stuff like Misfortune. So presumably, this is going to be working on skills, okay, right? So if we're going to assume this works on skills, it's a 9 mana card. That's really, really, really slow. I expect this card to be a little too slow to really want to be ran in that kind of deck. It's very powerful, but 9 mana is really, really, really slow. But we'll see. A lot of people will mess around with it, and it'll at least be very fun. Other regions, yeah, there's other regions too, right? Because there are more new cards. It's not just that one. So.